All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jeffrey Morgan, and this is a talk I host twice a week to discuss my experiences on the path of soul transcendence. This offering is brought to you by the movement of spiritual inner awareness with the encouragement and support of my friend, John Morton, who holds the mystical traveler consciousness, the spiritual consciousness that allows us to do the work that we're doing here today. If you're new to the call, the format is simple. We're going to start by calling ourselves forward into the light, which is calling our awareness forward into the light of God that's already present. Then we will chant three Anai hues. Hue is an ancient name for God, and Anai invokes the quality of empathy and compassion. Uh, then I'm then I'm going to play a video clip from my teacher, John Roger. And then I'm going to read the Lord's Prayer translated from Aramaic, and then we can talk about whatever you would like. So, with that, Ron Holnick, take it away, call us forward into the light, and then we'll chant some Anai Hughes.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So, Lord God of all creation, we take this opportunity and we ask that any disturbance, misunderstanding, judgment that we may be holding relating to the upcoming election in this country, any judgments that we may have in particular, we just let them go as we realize that anything we judge, we merely reinforce consciousness. And for that reason, Lord, we just let it all go. So be it.
Here I had this fantastic subject matter to give you people. Because of all the technical difficulties that we've had tonight, it completely threw me, and I don't even know what we're going to do tonight. So what I guess I'll do is we'll just wing it and see what comes out. So I just go for it? It's really nice that we don't have a tremendous guideline by which everybody has to measure up. The ground rules are really quite simple for you new people. It's don't hurt yourself, don't hurt others, and take care of yourself so you can help take care of others, and use everything to your advantage. And that using everything to your advantage means don't hurt others while you're doing that. Primarily, it's the incorporation of a golden rule or a rule of life in a way that allows you and in fact insists that you live at a peak level of performance. The more rules that I make that are of a negative nature, that limit, restrict, or confine, those are all saying the same things, but they cover different levels of consciousness. the more any of those appear in me as a human being and directed in a relationship towards you as a human being, the more I am treating you as an object and not as someone that can give back and nurture towards me as a person, and that this person does need nurturing as well as all other persons need nurturing. And I found out something in this travel across the planet. If I don't nurture me, it might not get done. So I make sure that I do that. Then if someone else comes along and decides they want some input into the nurturing, I say, sure, come on. It's okay to participate. Now, what's nice about that is if they don't participate the way I want them to, I don't have that going because I'm already full. So they may say, hi, and that's good enough for me. Or they may just look at me, and that's good enough for me. Do I need anything from them? No. Why not? You only have need when you have lack, and you only have lack when you're not taking care of what needs to be taken care of.
All right. This is the Lord's Prayer translated back into Aramaic by Neil Douglas Klotz and then into English. So it's a more, I guess, esoteric version, if you will. And I believe John Roger referred to it as the disciples' prayer, actually, not the Lord's Prayer. I think the Lord's Prayer is what Jesus did in private, and we don't have a copy of that one. But yeah, so the Aramaic prayer of Jesus. O birther, father, mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Focus your light within us, make it useful, as the rays of a beacon show the way. Create your reign of unity now, through our fiery hearts and willing hands. Your one desire then acts with ours, as in all light, so in all forms. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight, subsistence for the call of growing life. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us, as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. Don't let us enter forgetfulness, but free us from unripeness. From you is born all ruling will, the power and the life to do, the song that beautifies all, from age to age it renews. Truly power to these statements. Amen. May they be the source from which all my actions grow, sealed in trust and faith. Amen. All right. What would y'all like to talk about today? Carla.
Hi there. Um, I actually like that better than the Lord's Prayer
Me
that we
too.
normally say. And
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, we changed from trespassers to debtors. And it really bugged me because I'm like, what? We're talking about credit cards now? It just, I couldn't do it. Anyway, so my question is, today I had a medical procedure done, and as I was sitting in the waiting room, I started panicking, started getting really scared, like I needed to run out the door or something. And I couldn't quite figure what was going on. And then I had a sense that, my basic was like afraid and didn't quite know what was going on. And so I just kind of had a little conversation. I'm like, it's okay, it'll be fine. And I wouldn't put us in harm's way and all that kind of thing. And so my real question is, where do the three selves in your experience, where do they go, or what is their continued or lack of presence when you're sedated, when you're completely out? Like, should I be asking, please protect me, protect the humanness? I'm just a little like fuzzy on that.
Yeah, that's a fun question. I would say that part of um, part of how you're relating to it that kind of is confounding the mind or kind of looping is it all goes back to this kind of spatiotemporal metaphor where we visualize us as our body and that we have a soul and that somehow the spirit leaves the body and leaves something behind. And do you see how you start to build these metaphors of how it works? And you start to create distance and you start to try and visualize and make sense of that. I think a more accurate description for me when I look at how all of it kind of fits together is the soul is like the sun at the center of a solar system, and the elements of consciousness or the karmas that need to be expressed as personality or identity are like the planets kind of revolving around it. So there is relation. There is relation in the sense that the soul expressing into the down through the levels and into the physical body has in relation to it certain karmas and certain expressions. And one of those expressions, you could categorize a group of functions as the basic self and categorize a group of functions as the conscious self. So, in a sense, when we quote unquote lose consciousness, are we really losing consciousness or are we simply withdrawing from one part of this structure, the energy and concentration, to another part of this structure? Did anything really move? Did anyone really go? So you have this notion that you left your body behind. Well, first off, is it your body or is it simply a vehicle that has its own intelligence? And to a large extent, the basic self is that intelligence of the body. And thank God, because there's so many things my body knows how to do that I would consciously bungle up. So let's just take a moment. Everybody put your hand on your belly near your belly button and just say, thank you so much for taking such good care of me. Because that's what's going on all the time, even when we're not aware. And it's the basic self. When we go into soul travel and we leave the body, the basic self is the one manning the store, manning the till, right? So the basic self is going to do what it needs to do. Whenever you go into a sedated state, um, there's a couple things to keep in mind. And yes, I would ask for spiritual protection going into that, and I would bless all the instruments and everything involved. Because what happens is the chemicals that are used kind of forcibly remove the control patterns of your consciousness that try to maintain stability. It's a similar experience to when you like get blackout drunk, and people can pick up a lot of negativity doing that. But at the same time, those times when you go into surgery have the convenience of knocking out all your control mechanisms all at once. So sometimes the spiritual forms will go, oh, look, the person's not resisting on every level for a second. Let's go do some high level spiritual work. And you would have heard stories from John Roger about some of the most important moments spiritually or experiences spiritually happening while he was under being sedated or under anesthesia for surgeries, including the big one, the big one where he fully took on the mystical traveler consciousness. And thank God he did that. And there's a way in which I find that especially when we're plugged into this higher spiritual action consciously and intentionally, there is really no wasted experience. So what that means is you going under, you getting knocked out, and anything that's going to happen could be an opportunity for some experience on the other side that would have been blocked by the degree to which you try to maintain the control and stay in here. Now, the a lot of it is intention though, because then you could say, well, what about all those interesting experiences that people have on ayahuasca? Well, the intention there is to actually give away control, and it's not about healing. It's really about trying to force open doors of perception and have phenomena and experience. And it's really a substitute for a more authentic, direct experience spiritually. And therefore, it's a huge opening. It's a huge opening to negativity and usually doesn't have a lot of upside. And in fact, when you come back in, usually those doors are closed even firmer than they were before you went and took the drug. So I feel like in my experience, there's a lot more protection extended when the intention is there, which is I'm going to do this surgery. This is called taking care of this body. So I'm doing a surgery that's necessary to care for myself. And since I have to be under, Lord, I just want you to know I'm available if we want to go do some work together while I'm under. And you may find that in many instances that that's exactly what happens. But the truth of the matter is, you say, "Oh, well, should I ask for spiritual protection when I am going into surgery?" Well, if I were you, I'd ask for spiritual protection all the time, as much as you call on the light all the time, everywhere. Get in the car, call on the light. I mean, honestly, there's probably more risk involved in driving in traffic than there is going into surgery, if we're realistic statistically. Um, but that being said, I think that calling in the light and continuously invoking, and it's not in a sense, you go, how are you calling in the light if the light of God's already present? Yeah, but is my awareness with it? And am I in alignment and fully receptive to it? Or do I have levels of my consciousness that are in againstness and rebellion with that action that might be blocking the blessing of spirit that's present? It's kind of like, we talk about in meditation. I remember Paul K told me about this one example. I think I heard it was in a John Rogers seminar as well, where he talks about how do you hear that there's sound in the room, and then you go no, and then you pull out a radio and turn it to a dial, like, and then you hear music. But the music was always in the room. We just didn't necessarily have the attunement to the music that was present. So to a large extent, when we call on the light or we go into SEs or we do any of those things, we're taking all the rebellious parts of us and putting them into alignment with that experience and that reality that is spirit. But in terms of working with your basic self and the fear that you're talking about, there's a whole lot that can cause that. And when you talk about like sitting in the waiting room and being afraid, I think it's very useful to understand that, or at least it's been useful for me to recognize that there really is no past and there really is no future in that sense. If I'm experiencing as the consciousness that has had all of these lifetimes and all of these experiences throughout my life, I'm experiencing and completing a lot of it simultaneously. So it could be a scary experience that you had as a little girl. It could be a scary experience that you had in a past life. It could be a scary experience that you're picking up from somebody else in the room. And it could be all of the above happening simultaneously. And my experience with the the things that I walk through in my life is there's always that simultaneous, multi-layered fulfillment. So it's not simply that the ego is going to mock up, I'm in this story, I'm going to get this surgery, and I'm this person, and it becomes very linear and very simple. When I've been given glimpses through spirit of the multidimensionality of this existence, it's always a bunch of things being fulfilled at the same time, a bunch of karmas being fulfilled at the same time. And you may not realize, I mean, you may have been sitting in the waiting room clearing a karma that you had of negative anticipation when you were executed in a past life. But you were opportunistically, you were clearing all of that at the same time through that experience. In the midst of that complexity, there's a temptation to try to understand it, to create security through the mind. But my experience is that's kind of an impossibility and often a distraction when the opportunity is to go into a deep level of compassion and presence with yourself, loving yourself and being there with yourself and being the healing presence. And instead of identifying with it and going, oh, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I go, I'm the healer of nervousness. Then I'm the soul expressing as the healing and the completion of nervousness in this moment. So no matter what it is, it gets consumed, it gets burned in the fire of my loving. It gets transmuted in the loving that is present that I am. And it's a tweak on the attitude, a tweak on the perception, but I find that it opens up the energetic spectrum and the energetic possibilities. It's like when people wake up in the morning and they look at the bed and they go, "Oh, should I make the bed?" But then it occurs to them, "Oh yeah, God slept here." So then you make the bed. It's like that tweak. God's being present in the waiting room. God's witnessing the nervousness karma being expressed and completing itself. God's being present in that healing. And maybe your word is the beloved, or maybe your word is the soul, or maybe whatever it is, there is some part of us that is infinite, that is present and witnessing and has all the power to heal everything that we see just by its presence. If we can choose to be that and express that and claim that in every moment, then every experience we have becomes medicine. As much as you're going into the surgery to heal, you might be going into the waiting room to heal. And when you start to understand that there's no difference between the two, that every experience is brought to you in the healing and the fulfillment and the releasing and the clearing of spirit, then it becomes equal opportunity and it becomes very full and very complete.
Okay, thank you. I did ask for, the light to the doctors and the, all of that. But you're
Smart
right. I
move.
was doing a lot of like separating all the different, levels. And I appreciate the tip about, okay, God, I'm going to be like completely out of control. If there's something you want to do or say or
Yeah.
whatever, that's a great tip. I appreciate that. I will next
If
time.
if you felt like taking me for a swim in the ocean of love and mercy, I would not complain. I'm bringing my spiritual bathing suit. Let's go.
Right, right. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Um, Finca Toews. I don't. Oh, is it Finca? Yeah. Can you unmute yourself so I can hear you?
Hmm. Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Oh, perfect. I getting enough courage to ask this question, and I like what you said. You can ask anything you want. So I'm gonna ask this of you. See, I um, I had a son. Um, his name was Joel, and he had a drug addiction for a very long time, for almost 20 years. And I walked with him and I did everything possible to help him in his journey. And 4 years ago, he died. He died of fentanyl overdose. So um, my question to you is, well, I for sure I have some guilt feelings about it. Could have, should
Mhm.
have, could have saved him, but I couldn't. Maybe it was his time to go, and I understand that on a spiritual level. Thanks to my teachers, Ron and Mary, they used to tell me that in my journey when I was with them at USM. So, what my question to you is, do when they pass, do they actually, could they connect with us? Do they speak to us? Do they protect us in some ways? And there's also this saying, well, I'm going to see you um,
On the other
sometime
side or something?
on the
Yeah.
other side. And I'm thinking, how is it possible to do that? Because his body is no longer there, but it's, I'm hurting.
Yeah, I hear that. So I think a lot of the terminology and imagery that we talk about when we talk about death is very much informed by a focus on this physical level and the limitations and the way that this works out here. And a lot of the suffering that we experience is the perpetuation of a story of separateness, that we think that we lost someone because their body is no longer functioning. In point of fact, on a soul level, there's a oneness that it surpasses any closeness you could possibly imagine with this person that you had the blessing of being with. But what happens is we mock up in our minds limitations that keep us from the fulfillment and the completion and the healing of those relationships. So you asked metaphysical questions about what happens after you die and all that but in a very real sense, there's a part of you that I feel crying out saying, I just want to be close to him. I just want to hold him.
Yeah, right.
So if it's okay with you, why don't we address that one and leave the metaphysics to the philosophers?
Okay. Yeah.
There is a phrase from my teacher, John Roger, that has reverberated through my consciousness nonstop since I really took it in, which is all relationships are inside of you. And the second one he said is there's no excuse to withhold your loving. Now, we may not realize it, but the belief in our inability to experience the loving of another because of physical separation is a withholding of loving. It's subtle. Like you go, oh no, I would totally love that person if I had the opportunity. Well, let's just consider you have the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And if all relationships are inside of you, then what exactly changed other than the lack of physical contact or the lack of physical touch? What exactly changed other than the struggle physically with addiction or the suffering that he would have gone through that process? So you look at that and you go, what if the very best parts of our relationship are here, present, right now, inside of me? I still spend time with my grandmother. When we
Mm-hmm.
were, when I was young, she used to read me Edna St. Vincent Millay and play me Horowitz playing Rachmaninoff. And she had a thing for Michael Jackson, and we would watch Michael Jackson together, like the movies. And we would play cards together, and she would cheat every single time. And I would bake stones for her bridge club. And she loved roses. It seemed like every rose carried a poem inside of her. And she was unhealthy from the moment I remember her and suffered. She suffered with her body. She suffered with bipolar, manic depressive type stuff. She suffered greatly inside of herself. Inside of me, that's the thing. When I think about her as gone and dead, I'm robbing myself of the opportunity to be with her, when in truth, I'm with her right now. And every poem I read is in some sense read in unison with her voice because my love of poetry very much came from her love of poetry. I'm certain, my father helped. He's probably listening. So, but she used to read with me. I remember washing her hair, doing her nails, catching her in the bathroom smoking and yelling. But you see, as I'm telling you about this, I'm so full of the loving that she is, that I am, that we all are. I'm with her right now. There's no separation unless I decide there's separation. I've never been more in love with a person than with her right now. I'm never more in love with a person than I am with you right now. And the person that is present inside of me is the person that gets the full extent of my loving. So there's a way in which we can give ourselves the opportunity to just be with people, to just love and be in that loving that they are inside of us.
My son
If
was
you
very
could,
loving. He was very loving, and he never complained about anybody or anything. My other two children always complain about him, and criticize him and judged him, but he never would say a word about them. And so he taught me about love a lot. So I understand what you're saying. It's just he had a very pure heart, but very
and
troubled.
and a difficult karma, and a difficult
Yeah,
karma with addiction and with substances.
right.
Everyone in the world is suffering when they don't remember that they're God, when they don't remember that they're divine.
Yeah.
Everyone suffers, and no suffering is better or worse than another. And
Mhm.
there's a way that you can work with him and heal him inside of you. Do you understand? It's not too late. Work with him on his addictions inside of you. Work with him on his suffering inside of you. Like your
I've
mind says it's too late. Your mind said, well, do you want to know how I do it? I go inside of my heart with the person and I bring in John Roger because that's my reference point for the beloved. That's my reference point for the most loving being I could possibly imagine. And sometimes I bring in Lord Jesus Christ because, wow, why not? And then I just start asking them to help heal the situation, help heal the person so that nothing is left but loving.
Mm.
And even people who were my enemies at one time, I get to a place where they pulled off all the stuff and I'm just hugging the person and crying inside of me and it's complete. As soon as they release and clear all the stuff inside of me, it's so complete. I'm so neutral with them. You see, your mind mocks up this notion that you failed or that you missed something or that what if I could have done this or what if I could have done. Well, go do it. Go do it inside of you right now. Go be with
Okay.
him and help him clear his addiction. Because the you that related to him addicted, that person always lived inside of you. That's the person you've related to is the one inside of you, and that person's still there. You're holding him right now. So heal him until he's fully clear. Bring in the greatest spiritual forces that you got. Bring in angels, bring in whoever you got,
Okay.
and just work with him and heal with him. And each time there's suffering, go back in and discover more of what's there to heal. And there will come a time when you look inside of you for sorrow and all you find is loving.
Mhm.
You'll look inside for some regret or some upset, and all you'll have is tears in your eyes from overwhelming joy because it's like you're standing before God.
Mhm.
All I'm proposing is that we let go of the limitations. We don't need to suffer that way.
Yeah.
We don't need to torture ourselves that way.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Would this be what you saying? Would this apply to generational sin? Like, there's a lot of addiction in my family. There's a lot of whether it's
Do you
alcohol or
know,
drug.
I don't so I don't know that the child, quote unquote, bears the sins of the father or mother. Like, I don't see it as sin, but I do think there's this thing called psychic genetic memory, cell level memory. There are things that will pass on through the various levels of consciousness generationally. I've seen that happen, but it's not a punishment or an affliction or a curse. It's usually kind of like a computer program. It's like seeking its own fulfillment. That's why sometimes you'll see somebody, like a common one is a cycle of abuse where like father to son, father to son, father to son, and then one day there's a son who wakes up and goes, no, 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 it ends with me, and they transmute it through the Christ consciousness. And if you could see it energetically, it just makes you sob, but it reverberates up back to the beginning of time. It's hard to explain. I see this ricochet and it's like it's never happened. So there's a way in which we can clear to the root because all of it's present, the entire construct that we're dealing with. So there's a way in which your healing of addiction heals addiction for the whole universe because that's all contained within you. We're microcosms of the macrocosm of that expression. So your healing is all of our healing, and it's always a celebration. So, but I wouldn't overthink the generationality of it because there's so many causes. And chances are there's a past life that needed to be completed through his addiction process. There's plenty of ways in which addiction may just be part of the experience level that souls come into your family to get. But even still, there's ways of clearing the psychic genetic level. And sometimes there are ways of working with herbs, nutrition, different ways. You just need to understand what the program is and how it's expressing through the body and through the consciousness. But thinking about it as generational sin may in fact block you from seeing what's really going on. It's
Okay.
really just a program that's seeking completion through something.
Okay.
That's Yeah, you get what I'm saying? So there's no sting on it, there's no anger on it, there's no upset on it, there's no wrong, there's no right. It's just a system or a function, it's a process. And we don't need to judge it, but we can exercise our free choice and we can decide we would like it, this ends with me. Peace begins with me. This is going to clear now. And that can be very powerful and beautiful.
Mm.
The other one I love to do is I went through a period of time where I experimented with waking up early in the morning and praying for my ancestors, but not as an ancestral worship or something like that, but just saying, thank you, Lord, for all that came before me and create in this body and this lineage and everything. May they be blessed. May those souls that contributed to that process meet the mystical traveler as soon as possible and enter the Lord's embrace in the ocean of love and mercy. And I'm not saying it did anything for them, but it did do something for me because that whole construct of ancestry started to clear inside of me. And then there was a point at which, whereas I went through a period where it's like, oh, it's a big deal that my father was Welsh or something like that. And whatever that lineage, oh, it's a big deal that my mother was Jewish. So there's that whole side of that. And then I got to a point where it all cleared and I just went, oh, if people ask me, who's your family? I say, John Roger. Who's your lineage? The Lord Jesus Christ. What's your genetics? The gene of peace. And it just wipes it. It's like, I don't need to go for that story level. I don't need to play with that.
Yeah.
I can just be careful of how you define and describe your family lineage story and all that other stuff. Instead, observe the system and the function, knowing that it's perfect. And how do you know that it's perfect? Because it came out of God, and God's
Mm.
perfect.
Mm.
You don't have to worry about it being wrong or right. You can just exercise preference because that's one of the beautiful gifts we've been given as humans, the ability to prefer one thing over another. We don't have to judge it. We can just say, well, I really would prefer that the addiction clear out of my genetic level. Thank you. You see that? It can be
Yeah.
very light. It can be
Yeah.
very joyful. It can be very
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
The, you don't get extra credit for being heavy about this stuff. You really don't.
You make it sound so simple, so simple and so fun. Like,
It's
have fun with it, right?
have fun with it. Have fun with it because what's the point otherwise? Do what's fun. We're to
Yeah.
have joy and have it more abundantly. So you have fun with it. And it is, in fact, my approach is simple because if it wasn't simple, my mind would screw it up. I have to keep things real simple. But the simplest things in the world are often the most profound. So this simple approach can be like this, you're crying on the ground and releasing and going into Koreas and you're like, wait a minute, all I did was this one little thing. How come I'm releasing all this stuff? And so I'm not saying it's easy, but
Mhm.
it has been quite simple. if that makes sense.
It does. It really does. Thank you so much. I also, my teacher is Jaya, and I love him so much. I've never met him, but I feel very close to him. So I will always call on him and Jesus Christ, of course, too. That's two powerful people. How can I
Of
lose?
course.
How can I lose with that? Yeah.
Dream team, right? Dream team.
Yeah. Yeah. My dream team. Yeah. Yeah. So. Thanks. Thank you so much for answering me that. I was so nervous, but I'm no longer nervous to ask you that. So,
That's okay. God bless
yeah,
you.
yeah, God bless you. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go with Angela.
Okay, so you just brought back my beautiful Jewish grandfather that I loved and loved and loved. And I would go after school and he would say, "So what do you want today, a latke or a, a matzah mit schmaltz or a matzah mit butter?" And uh, when
I
he
love that.
died, he was my reference point for love. He loved me the way I was, and I loved him totally the way he was.
I
And
love that. Let's everyone just take a moment and put your hand on your heart and think of the loves from the people that we still carry and the love that they gave us that we still carry to this day. And
yes,
let's thank God for them.
thank God for him. I just really thank God. And when he died and I became involved with MSIA, I would take him into insight with me and say, "I know that you didn't have this opportunity for awareness, but I'm taking you with me and we're going to do this together." And I took him into USM. I took him into MSIA, and but none of it just brought all of this up in my loving of him. And I, at one time, became unattached to that love because my love was also transferred. I was dependent and attached to that loving, and my loving transferred to John Roger and the Christ. So I had all three.
Oh,
I
that's so
had the
beautiful.
physical foundation, the spiritual foundation of loving. But that's not my question.
Okay.
My question is this. I had lunch with my daughter and her boyfriend's sister and her significant other. And his sister is a very accomplished veterinarian in Connecticut, very mental, but very direct. And she asked me, "Angela, what is spiritual science? That doesn't compute with me." And for the first time, nobody ever asked me that before. And I had no words to explain it. If you ask me about MSIA, I know that really well. If you ask me about Insight, I know that. If you ask me about USM, I could, but I had no answer. So I'm asking you, if someone asked you that and was right in your face, how would you respond?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the cornerstones of what we do in the movement of spiritual inner awareness that makes us unique, and one of the reasons I love it, is the teachings of Soul Transcendence tell us that we're not to believe any of it. We're one of the few organizations that tell people don't believe any of what we say. Don't believe it. And then the people get shocked and they the shocked look on their face and you go, no, no, no. We want you to experience it. And how do you experience it? While you experiment with it. So even spiritual exercises is the experimentation of connecting the soul to the sound current consciously. So you close the doors of perception in order to create a clean experiment. Close the outer sounds, close the outer lights, and go inward. You do the method that has been set about for generations and hundreds, if not thousands of years. You chant the names of the Lord that were given by the Master, and you place your focus and see what happens. But ultimately, it becomes about what is shown, what is proven, what is demonstrated by the experience level. We also talk about how in the movement of spiritual inner awareness, we use what works for us and we leave the rest to God. We leave what doesn't work. And there's a constant reminder to stay in the integrity of that, to speak from the integrity of our experience, and to act from the integrity of our experience, not to pretend, not to do performance art, but it's about what is actually demonstrated by our experience. And in that sense, it is about a scientific method of individual unfoldment. So the concept of spiritual science is essentially taking a scientific, rigorous, personal evidence-based approach to spiritual inner awareness. And that means that we're going to go at it with a degree of rigor and structure, and we're going to make sure that we're speaking from the integrity of that. I do spiritual exercises not just because it feels nice, because it does feel nice, but the experiences that I have in that process continuously affirm the reality of soul transcendence and my relationship with the mystical traveler consciousness as active, as living, as demonstrable every day, every second of my life. There are so many faiths out there that are going to reference to that amazing experience that you had with Jesus Christ 15 years ago when you were in bed in your waking sleep. But my experience of what we do is we're looking for revelation and experience every single day.
Okay. Now,
And we don't settle for less. If we had less, we would leave. We would go look for something that would give us something every day. And I love when John Morton says, "Hey, look, I'm here because this is the best thing I know about going on this planet. And if there was something better, I would go find that." To me, that's integrity.
yeah,
A
I'm with that.
scientific approach, a scientific approach means we 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 favor the evidence and the experience of it, the demonstration of it over the idea of it. We go by the integrity of our experience. And we're constantly observing. Observation is another key. We're constantly observing what works and what
Ah, dis
doesn't.
donc, t'as terminé à 7h10?
Sorry about that. We're constantly reevaluating and constantly reexamining our belief level because belief is not what gets us the experience that we're after.
No.
It's direct connection within. So I love spiritual science also because there's this ridiculous idea that science and spirituality are incompatible. But the
Yeah.
funny thing is, if you dive in deep enough and you go past the particles and you go past and you go deeper and deeper and you reach the quantum level and you talk to a quantum physicist, you really wouldn't be able to tell if they were like a spiritual teacher or a yogi or a monk or whether they were a scientist. It starts to get real confusing who you're talking to because a quantum physicist sounds a lot like you talk to an astrophysicist and you start zooming out to the level of the entire universe and you have the same experience. So no matter
Right.
where you go, you find a whole lot of spirit everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, somehow we got into this habit of interconnecting spiritual experience with belonging, and then we called it a church, or we called it a religion, or we called it a whatever, but that's a social expression. All
Yeah.
religions arise out of that same interaction with the infinite, that same direct connection, that same realization of divinity. And then culturally, over time, it becomes a part of society, a part of belonging, a part of everything else. But let's just be clear, spiritual science is just about going back to the root. I'm going to use a structured scientific process and I'm going to find my way through this spiritual experience so that I can, with integrity, say, I know that I am God. I know that I am spirit. I know that there is a reality beyond what I physically perceive.
Because I do know that I was given the gift of life with my first breath, that was my gift from God, was my first breath. And I do know that. And then I was given the gift of use it however you want. Use that gift however you want. And that everything is already inside me. Every pet. I think I have one life. I don't think I have a lot of lives. I think I have one life that's with me now. Everything that I have ever done, that I ever was, is right with me now. And then spirit unfolds in its own time what I need to work. If it's a personal karma, if it's sometimes it's a lifelong karma that I'm aware of, I just have to accept and cooperate with and ask for grace. And if it comes, I'm grateful. If it comes, I'm grateful. But and I hear a lot of what you're saying is in that knowledge. It's a knowing. It's just a knowing that that's true, that that's the truth. And then I'm at peace with that, really a deep peace with that. And I'm preparing myself. I'm going to be 94. So I'm preparing myself to leave this earth as the beloved, just loving everything. And whatever comes in my face is for me to deal with right now, honestly. And whatever I
Or
have
for
to give
you,
up to
or for
God.
you to love, for you to love
Yes,
right now.
for me to love it. And I'm doing DSS 6. And this past weekend, it was very funny because the person that I was given in the breakout room, at one time I thought was an asshole. I had that judgment. And it came right up in my face. Well, you don't have to tell them that you thought you they were an asshole. You just have to clear that in yourself so that you now look for the good in him. Look for the loving person that's now, not then. And that was so freeing because it came up in my consciousness immediately. Like, okay, get that get that out of the way, you know, look at him as the beloved, as a loving being that's doing the best that he can. And he's different now. He's different now. He certainly is not an asshole now, you know. So I've been working very consciously in whatever comes up is for me to deal with inside of me, to heal, to change into the beloved. Like, so when I had a question, I was so taken back when she asked me, like, what is spiritual science? Like, and I didn't have an answer. Uh, I just was taken back. I said, oh, it's good
For
not to have answers
for me,
because they,
it's
uh,
well, I don't know is a very, very powerful state to be in. I don't know. But I
yeah,
would say that spiritual science might be the opposite of a belief system. I don't think we
yeah,
do belief systems.
yeah,
We we do demonstrable spiritual mystical
true.
experience.
Yes. That's what I do now. Whatever's present is what I deal with because that's what's present and that's what I have to deal, whether I like it or not. I may not like it, but I do deal with it. And then I get to love it
I
because it
love it.
treats me in another way. So I just thank you very much for being here. I love you and I love what you're doing. And
I
I
love
thank
you.
you.
My pleasure. Well, thank you all. I'm gonna go eat dinner. We often end with an MSA stuff by saying Berush Beishan, but in the interest of being universally approachable, I'll just say the blessings already are. Thank you all.